Patty Muenks. I'm Allison Norfleet Bringer, and helping out today is Kim Carr and Wanda Tyner. And this is going to be a little of a housekeeping thing. In our workshop today, we would like everyone to please stay muted. If you have any questions or issues, please use the chat feature. You will find the chat button at the bottom taskbar on your screen. Make sure to keep your paper and pens for notes. Near the end of the workshop, we will open up the floor for a little Q&A. Our speaker for this online workshop will be the Best of Missouri Hands president, Patty Muenks. Patty, would you like to tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, Allison. And thanks everyone for being here this morning. I have pretty much been an artist all my life, but my main business over the past, 6 or 7 years now has been in ceramics. I have my own studio here at my house, heARTheART Studios. I've done shows, I have a website. But the beginning of 2020, when things kind of changed, I took the opportunity to do some online courses, and I was introduced to art journaling. And art journaling for me has opened up a whole new realm in my creativity. And I have really enjoyed experimenting, and with everything that I've learned, I'd love to share it with you. So what I'll be doing is at the beginning, I'll go ahead and talk a little bit and just kind of show you my progression. Then I'll show you some of my art journals. And at that time, I'll go ahead and spotlight that. If for some reason you can't see it, just be sure that you have your gallery view on or your view on speaker view, and it should be able to come up full screen. So I got started. I mean, I have always kept journals. I started my first one. Actually, I brought a couple with me. My very first one was just this one I started in July of 1989. There I am at 16 years old. And I still to this day keep journals.
Patty, we
I
can't
love
see
just
your
that
journal. If
Yep.
you're wanting to show that.
Oh, okay. Here, let me go ahead and flip that. Let's spotlight that. Okay. So here's my journal that I kept when I was 16 years old. I would write about my life. I would save a few little things in my journals, but pretty much still to this day, every morning I love just sitting down, writing in my journal as a proof of life. In 2002, I got the idea of, I took an old copy of an Alice in Wonderland book, and I switched up my journaling and started doing, I still did a lot of writing, but I started adding a lot more collage. And I liked the way that was going. It gave me an opportunity to express myself, but pretty much from after that point, it kind of changed, and I just went back to keeping a basic journal. Well, in 2020, I started taking a course with an Irish artist named Amanda Grace. And Amanda says that art journaling is a practice of cultivating awareness, insight, and wisdom using art supplies. So when I started taking my course with her, I discovered how much fun I could have creating my pages. So my very first art journal I did was actually it's a Victorian scrapbook. I like the size of it. So when you're doing art journaling, you always want to think about the size. And I just had a lot of fun. I just started layering just all sorts of, basically any supplies that I had, I used. I used crayons, I used paint, and just layered. Everything was about layering for me. So when I begin a page, I'll show you, I'm sorry, I'm feeling I'm seeing some questions coming through. We'll do questions at the
Patty,
end.
could you share the name of the artist again?
Oh, sure. Her name is Amanda Grace. On Instagram, she's known as Pilgrim Soul. And she does offer a lot of different workshops, and she posts a lot of videos about her process. Yep, Amanda Grace, IG at Pilgrim Soul. So through the process with her, it really became a great way for me to express myself without feeling like any of the things I say or how I felt would ever be seen. And I love that, because even like if you look at this page began with me doing some writing. And once I get the words out on the paper, then I go through with paints and cut out collage items and cut out pieces of paper. And pretty much I use any supplies that I have here in the house. So it became pretty much an obsession for me. The beginning of 2020, after my first show in March, all the other shows were canceled. So I pretty much dove headfirst into art journaling. And a lot of the pages I did were based on a prompt or maybe a poem that I read or listened to and then sat with it. I personally love working intuitively. I don't normally have a plan with each of the pages that I do. This was a real fun page. So I like using books because all these people that are at the bottom of this page were actually in the book itself. But then I had a lot of fun cutting out the eyes and the mouths and really kind of played around with what was already on the page. I really got into doing some paint splattering too. So I found in my process with art journaling, I could really express a lot of emotions without needing to really put words to it. I'm very drawn to circles and the spiraling shape. I'll show you that when I do some demos of how I do that. But it really became just part of my daily practice, part of my creative practice, and playing with paints and supplies. And the great thing about art journaling is no one really is going to see it if you don't want to share it. So if you make some mistakes, you can easily just cover it up. There's no expectation when you get onto the pages. So I did probably, I'd say this book is maybe about a month or two's work. I would sit down and just go through pages. And what I like to do is build a foundation. And then I go back and I add cutouts and I add words and I add different images to really give the page a sense of feeling. This was something I kept there. I like that was from the book itself. So I might come back to that. Some pages are just plain and you'll see, this is basically a foundation that then I can come back and create on this page. So I want to go ahead and show you a couple different options you have as far as using journals. One of the things to think about is your size. And with your size, it gives you a certain amount of space. I would suggest not going huge with the first journal because it does become overwhelming when you have too much property to work with. So these are journals that I actually find at Walmart. I really like the hardbound covers, but they have a couple different sizes. This is probably like a, maybe 4x6 or something. Squares, like the first one I showed you, is kind of fun to work with. One of the things I look for is being able to lay it down flat so that when I'm doing pages, I can actually go across the whole, both pages to create a good spread. Some other options, I do really like this brand, Moleskine, and they have ones that have, this is actually like slightly dotted and gridded. They have blank pages, they have lines. The thing to remember is it's totally your personal choice. Here's a smaller one of the same style from Walmart that I got that, I did all sorts of, I was doing watercolors in this one and just cutting out words from an old book. This was one I haven't journaled in yet, but I actually bought it in art show. So it just has a simple 3 stitch binding. One of the things you also want to think about is the kind of paper that you're using, depending on your art supplies. The more wet, whether you're using watercolors or a wet acrylic paint, you're going to want some kind of a page that's a little bit stronger. I ran into a problem. This was a small little textbook that I had that I liked the cover. So I went ahead and I designed with just cut out pieces of paper, and I put a little bit of a matte medium coating on it. And I thought this would be a book that I could just keep solely for all my cutout work. I love using scissors and paper, but I found that the pages I was using, the cover was nice and hard, the inside was hard, but the pages were almost like an onion skin. They're so thin that it's, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it, because the pages just couldn't even handle any kind of paint. If I started putting too much on it, they would curl up. So main thing to remember is experiment, play around, see what feels good. I actually, in this process, I learned how to do the Coptic stitch. So I did my own binding of journals. And then with this possibility, you can actually go through then and choose the kind of paper you want. So I think for this, I just used regular copy paper. So I'm more careful of how much paint I'm layering on it, because it does, kind of absorb it and crinkle it. But so those are some different options. Main thing is you really want to think about what works for you. What do you feel most comfortable with? So this was one, this has probably become my favorite journal at this time. It's actually the same type of journal as these two, but a friend of mine decorated it and had mailed it to me as a gift. So this has really become my absolute favorite journal. I just like the way the paper works with all the different techniques that I use in the journals. So I know already that that's a lot to take in, but does anyone have any questions for me yet? I figured I would open up the floor and just, I have so much to share and so much to say about it, and I want to make sure that I'm actually answering questions that you might have. So any questions coming up yet?
There's
Okay.
nothing in chat.
Okay. So I figured what I would do is go ahead and just go through. I mean, I don't know how, interested you are of actually looking at my specific pages. There are a few. I did put a couple tabs in for pages I wanted to talk about. This was a real fun book to work in just because I love the title. And sometimes that might be it. the way the cover is or the title is. I have a great love of books. So I find this not as a destructive thing, but as honoring. So, but this one already, if you look at the binding, I'm, maybe more than halfway through, but it does get thick. So I actually like to keep my art journals on a bookshelf with the pages showing, because I think just even in that self, it's quite artistic to look at.
Patty, have you seen the showing, and have you seen this showing up in your pottery designs?
Yes, for sure. I actually did a series so I started in 2020 with art journaling, and throughout that year of playing around with my techniques in painting, I ended up going back to clay, created some shadow boxes, and used the similar kind of techniques I was doing with paints and mark making in my pages, and brought it onto the clay using underglazes and then drawing on the clay itself too. So it's definitely a relationship that started on these pages, it went to clay, and even I'm at a point now where I'm working on large canvases doing mixed media work.
Patty, another question.
Okay.
If someone has never journaled before, has never even considered journaling, why would they? What would you tell them would be the benefits of them starting an art journaling process?
I think it's a very free way of expressing emotions and feelings, being creative, just getting that motion to your hand and making that connection with things that are either on your mind or in your heart, generating it out through your hand and producing the mark making on a page. Keeping it on in an art journal creates a sense of privacy. It is something that it is for you. If you want to share it with others, by all means, I love spreading the creativity out, but it really is, it's almost like a sanctuary of being able to be with your thoughts and feelings using art supplies. And, I know in the amount of work that I've done, over the past year and a half or so, I have tapped into just a greater appreciation of being able to express myself through art. And sometimes, messages that come out on your pages might have nothing to do with what the image is. But so for here, I wrote, mysteries hidden under years of growth, I saw myself. There was a lot of meaning behind this page for me that really, as I just applied the paint and when I found this image, it really spoke to me of things that have grown over me. And I've used this image as, in a sense, to represent myself. These are all my private feelings and my private thoughts. And if someone looks at it, they don't know that. But I think there's really something to be said about expressing your feelings and emotions, whether good or bad. And I think using art supplies is the best way to do it.
Thank you. Another question, Patty.
Okay.
What glues do you like to use?
Oh, that's okay. Well, I do have a stash of art supplies that when I pull out the art journal, glue is something that I will be talking about.
Okay. And one more question was, and
Okay.
what protective mediums do you use, spray or brush with?
Okay, and that is something too. Actually, let me grab one more here. Yeah, as soon as I go through and show just a couple images, when I start to do some demos, I'll hit on all those questions. So just hold tight. This is one of my techniques that I really love to use. This is actually tissue paper. that using one of the mediums, so this is one of my favorite things to use is matte medium. I bought the Liquitex brand. It is a little more expensive at like when you buy it at art stores. I did end up finding this brand. It's Elaine's Premium Decoupage. I found this at Walmart for probably half the price of this one. And I find that it works just as well, if not better. And I'm a thrifty person, so I don't want to spend a lot of money. This is something, you know, when I first started, I was utilizing what I had. So one of the techniques I love to do is layering down tissue paper using the matte medium on top of it. The other thing I love doing is cutting out letters to write out poems or phrases or words. And I'll show you, I have a stash that I collect. You know, when I'm sitting and watching a movie, I will go through and just cut out pictures or fonts or things that I like so that it's always at hand. But again, this is that, oh, go ahead.
Another question. I haven't seen any dates. Do you not date your journals to keep track of your journey?
I don't, not in my, so I still keep to this day a daily journal of almost like morning pages that I write every morning that I date. With my art journals, I personally don't, because I like building foundations on pages and then coming back to them when I'm sitting, like when I'm ready to actually add collage, I'll look through. So a page might be made one day and then I come back a month later and then maybe another week or two later. So it is a process, but again, it's your personal preference. So if you are someone that wants to start doing art journaling and feels better about using the dates, you can incorporate them with numbers you cut out. You can get those cool little date stamps that like they used to use at the libraries. I mean, that you have, I mean, know that you are in full control of how you want your art journals to be. So
another question, sorry, Patty.
Yep, yeah, no problem.
Do you paint or layer over negative thoughts for a sense of growth and therapy?
Ooh, great question. Yes, I think that might be part of it. That idea of once it comes out of my mind and on the pages, then it's gone. Yes, I would say yes to that question. Great question. Thank you. Here's a page too that, you know, one day I just sat with, I love Sharpie markers. They're probably my favorite. The thick black Sharpie chisel point pen permanent marker is probably my absolute favorite. And then I do have some in colors. So this was actually done with one of these markers, but in purple. But you know, this is a perfect example of a page that I might come back and add layering to it, or I might sit and color each of these holes in with color pencil. The idea about the art journal is it's always there and it's dynamic, that you can always work with it. This was where actually I did this page, and then this is what led me to wanting to create my own journal that was all just cut out geometric shapes that, you know, I told you because of this thin paper that probably won't work out for me. But this is another thing. I love sitting with just some glue, some scissors, and a box of, you know, different kinds of paper. I have a big paper stash.
Patty, another question. I have been looking for a hobby because now I work to sell mostly. Would you say this is your hobby now?
I'm not really a big fan of the term hobby. Because, you know, the stuff that I'm creating in my art journals, I'm looking toward the future of how it could be profitable, how I could possibly be making money from the pages I'm creating, whether it is, creating greeting cards, or, I have thoughts of wanting to make, actually get a book published and maybe use a combination of my art journaling pages with poetry, or, whatever might come out. But I guess to make the question, give it an easy answer. Yes, I mean, it definitely started as, when I started it, it was a way to use up some of that time, that anxious time too, like the beginning of COVID and not knowing what was going to happen with the world. Like a lot of that, those emotions and feelings came out on the pages. I think it's, I think I saw Allison say a personal creative outlet. And I mean, that's it. It really is such a great way to express feelings. And yeah. Okay. So feel free to go ahead and keep the questions coming. I'm going to go ahead and give you a little demo now. So when I get started, okay, so let's talk supplies real quick. Oh, sorry for reaching there. This is probably one of my favorite, always has been all my life, one of my favorite art supplies. People, underestimate the power of a crayon and just a good box of 64 Crayola crayon colors. Things, honestly, if you have children, I would go and rummage through any art supplies they have too, because even I started by using just glue sticks. I have stepped up. I do like this Elmer's glue that sticks to more surfaces. They claim it's 2 times stronger. This I usually will use when I'm gluing down just the small, when I'm doing letters. I think you have a lot more control over using the glue stick. Like for this was a poem I ended up writing. That each of these I used a glue stick to glue down. I'm also a big fan of rubber cement. If you buy it at Walmart, you will get carded for it. I always find that to be kind of humorous when I'm buying like 4 bottles of rubber cement, but whatever. But as I said, this premium decoupage stuff that I do get at Walmart has become one of my favorites because I use it as a glue. And then I also like to layer it on top as like a sealant. I wanted to show you this page because as cool as this texture looks over here, this came about because my pages had stuck together. And when I sat down to open up the pages, this had all stuck together and I was like, oh, shoot. And I just left it open and let it dry. And I actually love, this is probably one of my favorite spreads because it was so random. And, I always love the idea of impermanence, that, nothing lasts forever. And it just was a nice reminder when this occurred. I was like, well, I'm going to go with it. Options you do have are to pull out pages if you don't like the way it came out. I have played around so much with, I started using a spray bottle. I just, keep a little spray bottle handy that when I add paints, I can just do a little spraying with water. I got a little crazy with it and ended up ripping a huge hole in the center of the page. I just went ahead and ripped the page out. You can keep it and work with it. Some of the other things, and this is, I'm going to go ahead and do a little demo with an old image I have, but these are my great grandparents. And I love using old photos. So on that note, let me switch over to clear some of my space here. let me switch over to some of the stashes that I have. So I love collecting magazines. And one of the favorite things I like to do is I'll sit down while I'm watching a movie and just pull out different items that spark joy or pique my interest or whatever it might be. I'll just sit, this was one I actually pulled out of a magazine yesterday because I loved this quote. There's always one real deprivation. I decided this morning, and that is not to be able to give one's gift to those one loves most. It was a great quote. I love the image, and I've added it to my stash. So every time when I sit down to do art journaling, I can go through my bucket here that has just, tons of all sorts of different kinds of images, textures, colors. So once you have this handy and you've built up a stash, it's always there for you to go to. I also like collecting words and phrases. I use these a lot on my pages to help express emotion by actually giving words to it. Good reason. That's always there. And, I like to keep things separated out. I do save, because I go through and I cut words a lot. I'll, any fonts that tickle my fancy, I'll go ahead and cut out and just keep them in a bag. So when I'm trying to write words or phrases, I already have a bag of just letters cut out. I slowly have been starting to collect numbers, but I don't really use numbers all that much. So clearly that's my stash of numbers. I did recently go through that box and separated things out into smaller images. A friend of mine sent me a whole bunch of old postage stamps. It's one of those things that you can, as you start building up stashes of things, you'll find items to use. So I did separate this out, and these are people, because sometimes I want to use people in my pages or on my spreads. Again, I just find images that I like that either make me laugh or make me cry or, give some kind of emotion. And my bucket is always here. I did recently start going through all these old photos that I had. And what I did, I have a laser printer. I find the laser printers actually work the best. I think with it, if you just have like a dot matrix printer or something, I think you might have issues of the ink smearing. But this is actually an image of my dad and I when I was a little baby. But I have all sorts of, this was my aunt and uncle. This is a picture of my dad when he was a baby. So I went through and made copies of all the old photos. So this is just on copy paper so that I can go through, cut them up. I have some pictures of Roy and I that I might use in some of my journals. So it's nice to have a variety of options to use. These are both of my grandparents, my mom's mom and my dad's mom. So that's what as I started doing art journaling, I just started building up my stash. I started collecting, different paint brushes. I bought some, Walmart again. I like being real thrifty with the supplies I'm buying, especially at the beginning when I wasn't quite sure where I was going with this. I just used what I had. So let me give you an idea of when I get started. I just go ahead and find a blank paper. And I always like to start with writing, whether it is a song that's stuck in my head or my intention. I I just will start writing. As I said, I love using the Sharpies, but you know, really any kind of mark making will work. You know, you can start just by doing some scribbling, you know, pencils, any ballpoint pens, anything to just get your hand moving is, I think, what's essential. Is, you know, you really do have to put aside the judgment and, you know, just start writing. So
Patty, do you create your own wording, like calligraphy or computer generated wording?
the wording that I put down on in my journals, I guess I'm not 100% sure. I do like, you know, I cut out words and fonts from magazines. I do print some stuff from the computer, but basically when I'm starting in a journal, I will start just putting words down on the paper. I normally do not write in cursive, but for some reason, when I do my journal entries, cursive writing is what my hand wants to do. So, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and write what's on my mind. And this is a good thing. So far I wrote, so here I am showing. I will just let the words flow. There's also a term, oh, I can't remember what it's called, but when you're writing, and often little kids will do this, you can do like the practice, like as if you're writing in cursive, but it just might be absolute jibber jabber. In my mind, I might be saying, oh my goodness, I'm feeling so scared doing this today. But if anyone were to come up and read this, there's no way they can actually make any meaning of this. If your privacy is something that's an issue, this is definitely a way that you can get thoughts out as your hand is literally going through the movements of writing. And you don't ever have to worry about what people think of the words you're putting down if it's actually just jibber jabber. Oh yes, thank you. Asemic writing. Annie, you get extra points today. So that idea of just feeling it in your hand, feeling the motion while your brain is thinking the words, it's really powerful. And there's nothing I could say to convince you of that other than I suggest just giving it a try. If you need, and you just have energy and you want to get it out, the other thing I recommend is grabbing some crayons and just scribbling. Just getting, you know, you can put a couple different crayons in your hand and just say you're really pissed at an argument with your sister or a disagreement with your boss. You can grab those and just start scribbling. And that motion of getting the art supplies in your hand and using them to get out on paper, I swear there is just some power, there's some magic in it. So my first layer usually is just writing. And the next step that I personally like to use is using gesso. Gesso is an acrylic based paint. It is with the gessos, it's pretty thick and permanent, of course, depending on how much you use. But when I do my pages, I often like to, once I get my writing out, then I like using just some white gesso. And I'll just splatter just a few little blops on my paper. And, you know, you'll get to know what you feel comfortable with. This is probably my favorite brush that I like to use, about, you know, maybe an inch or so in dimension. and just start covering up the words. And in my mind, you can go through and you can be releasing it all. You can continue to generate the thoughts or feelings. It's, for me, it is a mind and body connection with my creativity. And, I like to get things covered up, but I also like to keep some of it showing. I often use a technique, what's considered dry brushing, that I will just not normally clean my brushes off because it does kind of keep the pages from getting too overly wet. The other thing I like to have when I'm doing art journaling, I usually have at least 2, if not 3 different journals going at the same time. So if I happen to have some extra paint on this paintbrush, I'll go ahead and pull out, a second journal that I have and just maybe, wipe the brush off a little bit more on this next page. And it continues to build up foundation pages in yet another journal. And that's really my purpose. When I sit down, I'm building foundation pages that when I finish, that might be all that wants to come out on this page. And I'll go ahead and just, sometimes I wipe it a little bit. You can use wax paper in between if you don't want your pages to stick. But just starting to get stuff on paper and then turning the page. This is an aspect I personally love about Sharpies, is I love that they do bleed through. So already this page is starting to get some work on it. There's already something building that I could work with if I wanted. I could utilize the shapes that are already here and add something with what's already down on the page. Every page is basically free range of getting any kind of feelings or emotions out. So there I did have a little bit of a stickage there. You get some really great patterns and textures from that. The other thing I want to go ahead and show you.
Patty, a couple of questions have come up.
Okay.
A couple of comments. One comment was that will be a great resist with the watercolor paints.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that is a lot of fun to do.
And another comment, it was, I can see how therapeutic this would be. It's possible I would be crying the whole time I'm journaling. And I have a question.
And to that person who said that, I say, go for it. Let those tears out, because honestly, it is so therapeutic. Okay, go ahead. What's the next question?
Do you use plants, sticks, or mark making or stain? Do you use plants, sticks for mark making or stains?
I personally have not tried any of that. I have used feathers to paint with. But as I said, your options are truly endless. So whatever kind of coloring you want to do, whatever kind of mark making tools you want to use. I do want to just show, I remember it as I was talking about, I don't know, this might be a little too big to try and show off. I do have just this ridiculously huge stash of all my different kinds of papers and things that I use. That I just have a bucket full. I also have collected, where is it? Stuff for textures. These are things that I just absolutely love to use. Bubble wrap is one of my favorite things. I have all sorts of these mats, no skid mats that go under rugs, work and create great textures. This is another one of my favorites that can create dots. I have netting. This was, I think, from an avocado bag that, any kind of textures. And what's real cool is a lot of these, Actually, I pulled from my ceramic studio because a lot of these things I had been using to texture clay and thought how cool, I can go ahead and use it to create the textures in paint. So using sticks, using stains, using, you know, oil paints, using, I mean, it basically, I suggest you just use what you have at first. And if it's something that you like, the more you start playing around, you'll see things that will work for you. One of the things I recently came upon, I don't know if anyone's familiar with this, but I bought myself a gel press, a gel printing plate. I don't know if anyone has ever used this before, but this has become a game changer in my art paper stash. So what this is literally a jelly. It is, I mean, I wish you can feel it. It is just this stretchy jelly plate that you can layer down paints and textures. I use one of these brayers to roll the paint on it. But I just recently sat down, and this is my stash of paper that I made using the jelly plate. So I just love, I'll sit and make, you know, 20 or 30 sheets of just this jelly paper or jelly print paper that then I can go back and cut it apart, use it in my collages. I have yet to actually put an art journal page on it. I'm not sure how well that would work, but of course it has already been planted in my mind of a possibility. Same thing with possibly using canvas with it. But I just, you know, have had so much fun. This is an example of the designs you can get using the bubble wrap. So I had just put some black paint on the bubble wrap and then put the bubble wrap down. So building up, and this is, you know, most of this is just printer paper, nothing fancy, nothing special. You know, the more you want to dive into it, you know, the art stores will be happy to take your money. So, but I do recommend, if you don't have a lot of money, go and check out the art department at Walmart, and you really can buy quite a few things there pretty cheaply. The paints, I actually, this brand, this Apple Barrel, I buy at Walmart. I think the larger bottles are, you know, maybe like $3, and the smaller bottles are like $1.50 or something. You know, I really do. I like these. I did get the gesso, the acrylic gesso at the craft store. I do think Walmart does carry some gesso, but I was there buying canvases, and I do really like this brand, Master Touch. I actually have a big bucket of the white gesso because I use it so much. I did splurge, and I did buy some of these nicer acrylics, but I gotta say, they're kind of the plasticity of this particular brand. I don't know if I have, if you look in this one, it's really kind of a stickier. I actually did not like this type of acrylic in the art journals as much as I like just the cheaper one. And again, this is through trial and error. This is going to be through your preferences to see what works for you, what kind of style you have. You know, these are some images. Sometimes when I do writing, I like to keep it showing. Sometimes when I do writing, I'll go in different directions. So this was a foundation page I did where I got a lot of writing out. I did writing in this direction, and then I flipped my journal around. I did writing in this direction. I never went back over and did paint on this because when I sat down and I did the writing with a couple different colors of marker, I felt good. And maybe I only had about 5 minutes, and I thought, I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Next time I sit down, I can do some layers of paint. I can add some paper. So I want to go ahead and show you. Oh, this was another. This was another fun, just kind of playing around, like how I was doing the faces using different color, the eyes and mouths and stuff. I started cutting out bodies and putting animal heads on them. Now this one, the stance that this is actually Oprah's body, which I giggle when I look at it every time, but her stance and that kind of defiant attitude she has with her hands on her hips really kind of summed up a story that I was having with my sister. And this is one, it says reading again with a question mark. She's saying help. She's a little annoyed. And in this page tells so much of kind of a disagreement that my sister and I were having. No, it had nothing to do with reading, but it just worked because I found her with the book in her hand, and I was able to, like, once I completed this, I was like, yes, and for me, I love posting my pictures on social media. So of course I found it kind of humorous, like knowing that if my sister saw this picture, she'd have no idea it was about her. But I know, and I got the feelings out, and, it's a funny way to be able to express yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and do a little demo for you with using an image. This is an image of my great grandparents I had shown you on some of the other pages. And then this is my grandpa and his brother. And one of the neat things, so when you have foundation pages set up, I had a picture in mind. I did go through, I like cutting it out close to the edges. I personally just use scissors. This is my main pair of scissors I like using. This is a smaller, kind of a sharper point that when I need to do more of the intricate cutting, I'll probably use this smaller one. I know some people do like to use X-Acto knives. I'm not a real big fan of them. I have a tendency to rip my paper anytime I try and cut stuff out with X-Actos. So again, this is finding what works for you, what feels best for you. So when you are creating your pages, like in any other kind of artwork, you always want to be thinking about your background and your foreground.
Patty,
Yes.
can you talk more about how to deal with your own judgment?
Yes. It takes a lot of practice. It's a hard one. It's, for me personally, I do feel like I am the perfectionist, and it is really hard to, I'm trying to think of, if I have some pages that, okay, here's a good example. This was during one of my workshops that I did, and I was being instructed to scribble. And I was scribbling. I'm personally not a fan of this scribble. This is probably one of these spreads that it just kind of bugs me a little bit, because it's not, I look at it, I tried to go back and add some paint. I've done more layers with it. One of your options is to just cover it up and add more. And that's kind of the cool thing about this, is it's all about your layering. The other thing is working with it. This is a page that I've left in here. I haven't come back to it. When I see it, I'm kind of like, not really a fan of it. But I know it helped me to, whatever it might have been, holding the crayons or using the paint a certain way. It really is just something that we each need to work in our own selves. I know that's a lot easier to say, and I guess it's through, with my art journaling. I mean, I can look over here and I have, pages and pages and pages of art journaling that, not every page in my mind really came out that great. But the thing is I continue to just keep going, keep creating. Like any other art, you have to practice, you have to continue to work on it. And, you know, working with my self-acceptance and my really kind of quieting my inner critic has been part of this work too. And, you know, it's just something that I just suggest you stick to it, because it, you know, through this process, you are uncovering things in yourself. And sometimes things can get kind of dark, you know, I mean, you know, the person that was saying they might do some crying when they're going through this, that's perfectly okay. Because the thing is it's, once you get things out on pages, and whether it needs to be tear stained as well, it's no longer inside of you. You're letting that go. You're releasing that. And that's been a huge part of the work that I do with Amanda Grace. I mean, she is my mentor, and she's also a spiritual guide, and she is a creativity coach. And she encompasses so much in her teaching that not only did I learn techniques of, you know, the how to art journal, but I also learned the why. Why am I art journaling? Well, it's honestly to support my mental health, to spark my creativity, to allow for me to get messy if I need. And, you know, I mean, it's such a great outlet. And, you know, you can go back, and if you honestly don't like pages, rip them out and, you know, burn them in your fire pit in the backyard. And in that, you know, there's a release. So that's my very long version to answer that question. And just know it, you know, it's a continued search. And, you know, some days it's easier and I don't feel so critical, and other days I might sit down and hate what's coming out and will just walk away and go do something else because I'm just so irritated by it.
Allison shared that this might help us to be more forgiving of ourselves.
Oh, amen to that. That's very true. Because you do, you know, even as I said on this page, it was like when I went to pull the pages apart and they stuck and were kind of sticking to one another, I was like, oh, shoot, like I really messed that up. But, you know, it actually turned out that like, you know, this is one of my favorite pages. Like, I just love how this came out. And this is actually a fun technique of creating a poem called, I believe it's Sing Queen. And it's a 5-line poem, and it's broken up. Like, I think you start with like your noun, you do 2 adjectives, you do 3 adverbs, you do a phrase that reflects the first word, and then your last word is like either a synonym or another word that connects. So this was a poem I did. I wrote it out on paper, and then I sat down with my stash of letters, and my poem says, feather, soft light, flowing, flying, fluttering, soaring wind in flight, freedom. And I found a picture, this actually a picture I took of one of my feathers. So, you know, creating poems, writing letters, you can write letters to either family members that are alive or no longer living. You can, you know, there's just so many different possibilities. I'll sometimes too just write things, you know, this was something I read along the way. The creative self is attached to the essential self. So, I mean, you know, you can dive as deep into this as you feel necessary. You can go on a whole, you know, soul searching for your authentic self, or it can just be, you know, some pages that you like to color. And that's, you know, there's no right or wrong way of doing this. So let me go ahead and just show you, I'll just use this page. So when I have pictures that I want to add, as I was saying, you want to think about the background and foreground. And sometimes when you add images, like if I were to just go ahead and put that image there, they kind of get lost. So one of the techniques that I learned is actually creating like a veil around them. So I'm going to go ahead and show you just real quickly if I can find. I wish you could see actually what my space over here looks like, because I got stuff everywhere. And that's how, for me, that's how I like to work. I like basically having everything out to be able, here, I'll give you a little. So here's all my, you know, supplies are over there. Over here, I have just a stash of everything. So, you know, I get myself set up so that everything's available at my fingertips, and you know, it's ready for me. I pretty much keep all my art supplies out. I like to keep my area clean and tidy, but when I'm working, I pull everything out. So with this premium decoupage, this is just a real simple brush I like to use. So when I'm using this, I'll go ahead and, you know, it's real important to get your edges. It's always, you know, the edges love curling up. But this is one I'll just, you know, go through. I like using just like a paper towel on the side that I can glue on. I do this when I use the rubber cement as well. And just keep the paper towel down so that, you know, once I'm done, I can just throw it away and I don't get my table all sticky. So I get all that, you know, covered pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and add my grandpa and his family down. Down in the book. And then I like to go back through with the same stuff and just kind of, you know, go around the edges if it's sticking up a little bit. Add a little bit more. I personally like using the matte because I'm not really a big fan of the shine, but I do believe you can buy this stuff with the shiny, you know, finish to it. And then I did actually, let me show you this one. At one of the craft stores, I found, I mean, it's considered a matte medium, but it had a sparkle to it. Oh no, I'm not gonna be able, of course, the hardest part is actually trying to find things you're looking for when you go back. But I was doing a project that had to do with sparkle. So I ended up using this stuff that had a nice little sparkle to it. I can't find it. We'll get back to these guys. So it's important. I mean, for me, I like to get things, making sure they're as flat as I can get them, make sure all the edges are down. You know, I'll use my fingers too and just press them. I mean, I have no qualms about getting my hands dirty. Remember, I am a ceramic artist also, so dirty hands don't scare me. So then what I would like to do with this is bring the picture of the people forward. And one of the techniques you can use is adding, I love using just white paint for this. Now, for my palette that I use, I actually have this old board book that I'll use as my palette. I like how the paint dries. Eventually, once this is fully covered, I envision this becoming another art journal, but for now, it's just a nice handy board book that I use that gives me surface where I can mix my colors. You know, you can use the store-bought plastic ones, whatever, you know, again, whatever works for you is what's most important. Now, so this technique that I'm going to show you, I personally like to use more of like an angled brush. This one's kind of slide because I probably didn't wash it so well. But I like using an angled brush to be able to get in. And the nice thing with this stuff, it dries pretty quickly. I mean, I can touch it and it feels kind of cool still, but it's no longer sticky. So that was another thing I really like about that brand. But what I like to do is just add a layer of white paint around whatever the image or photograph or whatever I'm using that I want to pull into the foreground. And by doing this, by creating this veil around it, you are pulling the image out front and you're pushing that background back. It did take me a little bit to just kind of practice, how much is too much. I do like to use my fingers too, and I'll just kind of, kind of smear it around and spread out the paint a little bit. But it really is a neat technique so that you're not necessarily losing the background, but you're helping the image to come out more and to be more of your statement. Now, if you obviously want your page to be totally lost and you're trying to make a statement about, people lost in the chaos of the world, maybe you don't want to do this. But it's a nice technique that I found that really does help to bring things out into the foreground. So that's one of my tricks I like to use when I'm using, photos. Just kind of helps pull them forward. And then again, with my dry brushing and not using too much, I mean, a little bit of paint goes a long way. I have learned from experience that, sometimes I just goop way too much paint on pages, and, that kind of gives you a whole different experience. So I like to just use a little bit at a time, bring that veil out further, however much you want to. The other thing I like to do too is maybe give, if I'm doing something like this, maybe I do want to create some kind of like a grounding feeling so that, they're not just necessarily floating in air. And, you can add ground, you can add more, words, you can add all, whatever you want, however you want the pages to unfold. So, oh gosh, I just looked at our time. So, I know we were trying to shoot for an hour, but as I said, I can just, go on and on. But does anyone have any questions or want to see anything else? I mean, you are more than welcome to reach out to me at any time. You can find me through Facebook. You can find me through heARTheART Studios studio page or heartheartstudios.com. I'm Patty Spiral on Instagram. So, feel free to reach out. But any other questions or things you'd like to see? Yeah.
I've got a comment, Patty. Wanda and Alice and I have been doing the Zoom workshops for over a year now and stuff. And I want to say that I think this is probably our best workshop ever. I don't know that I'm going to journal and stuff, but I really enjoyed this and I learned a lot. So thank you. I think you were an excellent, so bravo. Good job.
Oh, well, thanks so much. I mean, it's easy to talk about something you have a strong passion for. And this is definitely where I'm seeing my art going. I mean, I'm always going to have my hands in clay as well. But, I get so much joy out of this. And as I said, the work I've been doing and just feeling more grounded and more centered and, you know, more honest with myself. And the more honest you can be on these pages really allows you to live a lot more honestly in your life as well.
I think you did a great job. Is there any way possible that you can show us a canvas real quick, or one of your collages, one of your wall pieces that to show how your journaling has you know, migrated into your other work too?
Yeah, let me go. Hang on, let me go grab one off the wall.
Okay. If anybody else has questions for Patty, go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'll get them answered. You know, we'll wrap up here in a few minutes, but.
Okay, so this, I mean, this is probably maybe 2 by 4 foot, I think. Here, let me actually spotlight myself here. Let's see if I can do this.
You're already spotlighted.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah, that's very nice.
so that's one that I really try and bring it, you know. So there's all sorts of, I mean, one of the things I like doing is using watercolors on old books that I've cut up. So these are actually squares of pages from an old book that I did watercolor on. These are rings I cut out. You know, a lot of this is paint. There's my tissue paper layering that I like to use too. So yeah, so I found, I mean, at first I had no idea that, you know, this would be something that I would become, you know, a mixed media artist. And my first canvases I did were just smaller, you know, and it was, I mean, my husband's my biggest cheerleader, and he was really like, you should really go to canvases. Like, he was just looking through my art journals. He's like, you should try it on canvas. And I was like, oh, I'm not a painter, you know, like all those self-doubts and things. And I just picked up, I think the first couple canvases, I did like a couple 8 by 10s. And I was like, ooh, okay, but you know, maybe I need to go a little bit bigger. So currently the biggest one, I think I have it's either a 4 foot by 6 foot that I actually do have hanging in our living room. And even after I did that, I'm like, I want bigger.
Yeah. Well, thank you for showing us that. And Lorraine had a good question. She asked, do you ever show these? And I know that you're wanting to start jurying into art shows with your canvas and with your ceramics. But she says, if so, do you have any concerns about copyright when using stuff you've cut out and used? And by the way, excellent workshop. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Lori. Well, I know I have looked into, there is the, oh, what is it? It's like Fair Use Act or something along that lines. I personally, if I were to be selling my work, I probably would not be using images like, you know, it's real easy to do all this in my journal because I know it's not going anywhere. If the time comes where I'm actually ready to sell the work that I'm creating, I probably would not use any kind of images. I think using letters would still be okay because they're, you know, being cut apart, that, you know, it's something I would look at, but I would be more conscious of only using my own personal photos, using my own paper that I created, and keeping it, you know, that it's pretty much everything that I've done, just so I don't, you know, when I become that rich and famous artist, I don't have, you know, any companies coming after me. I did, oh, I don't think I have anything. I was going to show also a couple of the I was asked about, how this work has come out in my clay work. And I did create, if you go to my website at heartheartstudios.com, I did actually create some shadow boxes where I made the forms out of clay and then did layers with texture and underglazes and really had a lot of fun with those. So I do have some up on my website. And that was a real fun way. My next project, a little sneak peek, I'm going to tell you, not show you, but I really want to incorporate doing weaving on ceramic bases. So I'm playing around with, creating like the holes within the ceramic, whatever, if it's going to be bowls or wall hangings, or I'm still sketching them out, but really incorporating that mixed media of using like beads and yarns into the clay work. And then stamps. My husband's been making me letter stamps he has a 3D printer. So that's been our newest exploration. And like, just, I feel like I'm always growing and learning, and it's all coming out in the artwork that I'm creating.
Well, you've done an excellent
Okay,
job.
well, any other oh, thank you so much. Gosh, I really appreciate seeing everyone here. Now it's like I'm finally taking a minute to actually look at all the faces of everyone here. And I just really appreciate all the support. And as I said, feel free to reach out to me, send me any DMs or questions. I love sharing this, and we've had talks of possibly doing more of like an actual journaling together, where we all meet up and we have supplies out, and, I can demonstrate some of the ways of doing what's called a sacred seeing, where, you listen to a poem and then you actually journal about it. And it's just, it's really a neat way to tap into your creativity through, different kind of tools that you might never have used before. Like I never thought of myself as a painter. I really did not use much paint. And now it's like, I have this ridiculous stash of, paints now that I love it. I really got into mixing paints too. That over the past couple of months, I've been mixing colors and having a lot of fun with that too. So okay, well, if there's nothing else, then I think we're ready to sign off here. Thanks again. Thanks to Best of Missouri Hands for hosting this. And of course, I love being part of this organization and president. So I love
You
it.
did a fantastic job and great workshop. So thank you. If anybody's got a last minute
Thank
question,
you, Patty.
come in.
Thank
right.
you very much. You're an excellent teacher, Patty.
Thanks. Good to see everyone. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hey, Patty, I do have one last question.
Okay, Lorraine.
You mentioned a little bit earlier a way to write a poem where you used one noun, 2 adjectives, 3 adverbs, etc. Where can I find more information about that?
It's called a cinqueen. I believe it's CINQUIN.
Okay.
And I know there's some different formats, but roughly, it's a 5 line poem, and then the breakdown. But it really is a fun way, whether it's just choosing an object. Like for me, it started with I chose a feather, and then that's where the poem came from.
Just Google Sing Queen and I should get some. Okay, thanks.
Oh yeah, for sure. You got it. And if you are curious more about art journaling, there are 5,029 at least different videos. You can get onto YouTube and just, do a search for art journaling, and there's so many different varieties. It took some time. Amanda Grace is someone that's very dear to my heart, and I loved her. I loved her Irish accent. I love her abrasiveness and her humor and what she had to offer. There were some other people that I watched one art journaling thing and was like, whether it was the sound of their voice or their style. And I was like, nope. So, you got to find people and influences that really truly speak to you. And, not having the judgment is a huge part of it, and just accepting what comes out. And just, being willing to play. Like, so much of it is just that sense of play and, experimenting with stamps and colors and, use your hand and put handprints on things. I mean, it's just, gosh, you can tap into so much. So more power to you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being
Okay.
here today, and appreciate
Thank you,
coming in
everybody.
and
Thank
sharing.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great day.